Hey there everyone, welcome to this video breakdown of my latest environment that I've completed in Unreal Engine 5. This is the Sacred Meadows, or Sacred Meadow. I just came up with a name. It looks kind of like a meadow, I guess, but I always try to come up with some sort of creative names for my pieces rather than just putting stylized forest or something like that, even though I did technically do that for some. Um, I'm going to go through basically each and every piece that you're seeing in the scene. So we're going to talk about rocks, various different methods on creating them, their shaders, as well as shaders for the grass and how you can make grass, trees, and so on. So everything you're seeing right here, we're going to talk about individually, as well as the clouds and all that stuff, how to get a nicer sky and all that stuff. And we'll go over some post-processing toward the end a little bit, because I feel like that's a little bit more of a broad subject and it's really up to the artist in the direction they want to go. So without wasting any more time, we'll jump right into the breakdown. But before I do, I want to just give a little introduction about myself as an artist, because I have worked in the game industry for a little while. So I have some experience in that. I've worked with other artists, and I've even became sort of a lead artist, I guess you can say. And I had some artists that kind of basically helped me out with stuff, and we all give each other critiques and so on. So I'll talk a little bit about that in my introduction. But anyways, if you don't want to see that, I'll have a timestamp in the description or on the video, and you can click that and just jump into the breakdown. But again, let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the intro. Alright, introduction time. So I'm just going to go by my artist name, which is Zephyr's Domain, or just Zephyr for short, I think is a lot better. And I've been a 3D artist for quite a few years. I specialize in environments, which is kind of obvious with the work that I do now. I used to mess around with a lot of other things, but you kind of want to focus either on environments or characters. So I stuck with environments. I just really like building levels and things like that. And before I get into like work experience, I started off just looking at tutorials and things. Blender was my first 3D modeling application. I dabbled in Maya a bit, but didn't really like it, and there's just too much just to use it. So I didn't really mess with it too much. So I stuck with Blender. Eventually I learned a lot of the other programs as they came out, like Substance Painter and so on. And then I started to take courses in college, and eventually graduated with a 3D animation / 3D modeling degree. And basically they were the same program, and I did some animation, didn't really like it too much, and just did modeling all the way, and it was pretty easy to get through the classes. I had a really good professor who actually worked in the game industry, so that's always a plus. And after that, about a year after, or maybe a little more than a year after, I got my first chance at a small studio. I was reached out by the lead artist. They asked if I wanted to try it out and see for a position as an environment artist. And I did go through an art test. I was able to pass that art test, and eventually I got a chance at basically working on a project. And this game was a MMORPG, which is obviously not a good start for a small studio, but of course this studio seemed to be quite successful, so I was able to work over there and basically help them out. They gave me a lot of different tasks, and over time I just was bombarded with so many tasks that it became really difficult to sort of keep up. And eventually the company started not doing too well. I don't want to mention any names of the company or the game itself, so I'm just going to keep that under wraps. But it did have a pretty good player base, I believe 10,000 or so, and we did interact with some of the VIP players and talk with them, and they give us their feedback on what they thought of our models or anything like that before it gets put out into the game and so on, and then it gets tested. So it was quite the experience. The person who was the lead artist eventually became an art director and level designer, because in smaller studios you're going to be doing multiple things. And I ended up becoming the sort of lead environment artist. And I did have some help from other artists who can basically build other filler props and things, and help me out so that we can bring whatever the level designer wants, whatever the art director is craving for. So that was just a little intro about me, probably a little too long, but just my experience in that studio and just how I got started. It just takes quite a lot of time, so you're just going to have to be patient with it. Some people are lucky and know someone in the studio already, and they can help them out and guide them, but others, you just got to kind of work at it and just keep posting and try to improve your portfolios. Try not to make too much things that are, try not to make too much fan art stuff. Try to do things that are unique and creative that you want to do. So, and just get inspiration from other things out there. But yeah, that's the end of the intro. So now we're going to jump into the breakdown. Alright, so we're here in Unreal Engine. We're kind of just going to start here, and we'll go by the different objects that are in the scene. So the first object I obviously started with is my focal point, which was this right here. This specific rock shape. Now, these other rocks are kind of merged in together with this shape, because at first it was just this sort of shape here, without these rocks on the bottom. You'll see what I mean in a second. So I eventually improved this a little bit more because it looked too flat, and this kind of helped break that up a little bit. So this is my focal point, and to get this, I basically used an add-on in Blender to kind of chip away some of this already, and then I went into ZBrush and added a lot more detail to it. So let's kind of turn this way here. This is where I did my sort of setup for my breakdown that you can see on my art station. I have the assets breakdown. So these are all of the assets that I used for this scene, other than the animals and whatever. The other stuff in the back are just mountains. They're low poly, so it doesn't really matter. But this is the object itself. So as you can see, that's all it is. It's just the bottom there. And these rocks are just all filler rocks that make it look like one big object, right? You're pretty much faking everything anyways, and it's from a distance, so when people get up close, obviously in a lot of games they just jam some rocks and things together and they make it blend so that it feels like it's either one piece or broken up, depending on what it is. So let's kind of talk about rocks now that we're on the subject, right? How do you make these types of rocks? Because stylized rocks are kind of hard to make sometimes. You can even use these to make realistic rocks, but we're going to jump into Blender and I'm going to show you a method for making rocks. Now, I'm just going to have to go on this side real quick, and I believe I have Blender open. And here are the rocks, the high poly versions of them, right? So I'm just going to show you a quick example, not using the high polys, but I'll use the sort of low polys here. Let's just say this is a rock, right? What you want to do is you want to first create your first rock. It doesn't have to be super detailed. It doesn't have to be something like this. It can just be one shape. So let's just say that this piece right here, not these other ones, was the shape, right? What you're going to do is you're going to take that shape and just put it to the side, and then you're going to make a new rock. You're going to make a different shape out of that, and you're going to keep doing that until you make a few different ones. Then what you're going to do is you're going to try to mix and match them together. So for example, let's just say this is a different rock. I'm going to just mix and match, and then I'll kind of move it in here. Then I'll take maybe it again and just scale it down like this. Scale it in on the Y, move it over. We'll do something like that. Maybe I'll scale this like that and then just bring it up a little bit. And then you can kind of go around it. You get the picture. And then what you want to do is you want to just join them together. And then once they're joined together, sometimes it's better to do this in ZBrush, but Blender has this remesh option. You're going to do voxel. You don't want this to be too high, so I would just leave it where it's at by default, just to see in case, because some computers won't be able to handle this. You're going to just have these two, and then you're going to do voxel remesh. And what it's going to do, just as an example, it's going to combine all that together. And now, as you can see, this is all one mesh. It's not separate rocks like how it was before. If I go back, it's separate, see? So that is how you basically make rocks. You just do that. And sometimes you don't even have to make the rocks. If there's like a rock pack or something that someone made, you can just take some of those rocks and make your own unique rocks. And it saves you a bunch of time. Now, don't get this mentality that a lot of people are going to be, oh, well, that's cheating. Well, guess what? In the game industry, you're going to have to get things done, and it has to be done at the deadline. So you're going to be given that deadline, and you need to do something quick. So sometimes that's one method that you're going to have to take. And so just something to think about. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And even if you wanted to, you can bring it into ZBrush and just sculpt and mess around with it even more, or just do it in Blender if you want to sculpt there, or whatever program you want to use. So that's just a little bit about how to get those rocks and the shapes. Now let's talk about the materials for this, right? So I'm just going to show you the material in Unreal Engine, and then I'm going to try my best to go on Substance Painter. The thing is, it's really heavy when you go on there, so it can crash. So I'll try to show my material, but my material is almost close to, if you ever seen Stylized Station, he has videos on how you can make a stylized material, just sort of the basic. But it's all comes down to what you want for your piece and how you want your rocks to look, because you might be making a realistic scene, so that's going to require a different type of material that you want to create. But here is the rock. So if we go here, we'll go to our little rock group here. This is literally the material. That's all it is. And it's not even complicated. Now, this is vertex colors. Don't worry about all this. All I have is just this plugged into there. This is a whole nother thing, but I painted a little bit of moss on one of the rocks. If you see the whole environment, you can see on the bottom of some of the front rocks, there's like a little bit of a green moss, and I just use a simple noise texture. I added a color to it using a multiply, and then I lerp it, which is going to blend the two together. And then I add this vertex colors node, which you just right click and you do vertex color. There it is. It's going to bring this in, and I'm using the red channel in the alpha of the lerp and just plugging that into the base color. So when I go up here and I go to mesh paint, I can paint on my rock and paint this secondary texture. Now the main texture is in B because that's by default. B is going to be the one that shows up. If I switch these around, then it's going to be the weird green moss color. So always remember your main texture is going to go in B, and then A is for if you want to do this sort of thing. And then this is just my roughness and ambient occlusion and my normal map. It's just all plugged into the same thing. There's no tricks here. I'm just using surface, mask, default lit, and that's it. There's nothing else here that you have to worry about for the rock, and that's all it is for the material. Now let's see if I can open up Substance Painter, and then we'll have a look at my material setup for this. So here we go. We're in Painter. Let's load up the file here real quick, and I think this is the only one I'm going to show. The other ones don't really matter. So here are my rocks. As you can see, looks almost like, or pretty much like, what we have in Unreal Engine. And right here is the material. Now I created a folder, which you can do right here, and it's going to group everything together, and then from here you just add all the little layers. If you want to add a fill layer, paint layer, or just a regular layer. And I believe all these are just fill layers. And I start with a base color. So let's turn these all off for a second, right? Let's just see how we get there. Hopefully it doesn't crash, and it's probably going to crash. Yep. That's why I kind of don't like using Substance Painter when I'm on other programs, because it's one of those programs that can crash quite easily. So hopefully get this up and go back. Alright, cool. So let me turn these off again. Alright, so I start with a base color. I choose the main sort of color that I want, right? Then what I do is I create another secondary color for a sort of, just to break up the main color, right? And what I do is I add a black mask, right click, add black mask. And then I added a generator here. So you, after you add the black mask, you can click on it and go here to add the generator. Or I believe you can right click and then add generator. And then you're going to just choose this MG mask editor. It's obviously going to say outdated because it's sort of old school. And then you just sort of mess around with a global balance, and obviously, as you can see here, this is going to affect the shading of that. So just going to go back real quick. And that's what I start with first. Then I add ambient occlusion, which again is, I'm using a multiply layer for this, and I just have it as a white color. I do have paint because I did paint away some ambient occlusion, so you can do that. If you go down here, if you set it to black, it's going to erase whatever you have on your mask. And this is the main thing. I'm just using this MG dirt generator, and you can access it the same way as the other one. You're just going to select the dirt generator instead of the mask editor. And that's going to be your ambient occlusion. So as you can see, it just adds a little bit of shadows in some of those areas. Now, sometimes you may not want this depending on the game. When I worked in the little studio, they didn't want ambient occlusion on there. So, and then we have other things like highlights. So don't worry about this gradient bottom. I just like to mess around with things. So the highlights just pop, make the edges pop a little bit. And then I have this details one. As you can see, it just adds a little bit more variation to the texture. And that is just using a fill layer, which you can right click, add fill. And then from there, you're going to choose, like, you can put it in the grayscale. You can choose a sort of noise texture from whatever textures here. As you can see, there's different ones if you look around. And that's going to break up and give you a pattern on your rocks to give them a little bit of detail. And obviously I have this as overlay, and I make it 100 opacity. AO is multiply, and then highlights is overlay with 50%. I don't like highlights too strong, and you don't want to make them too strong because people are just going to notice that, and it's not going to look good. So that's pretty much it for the material. That's how I do stylized rock materials. So I think we finished covering rocks, and we'll jump into the next thing, which the next thing I did was, I believe, the trees. So let's jump into that. So trees, before I get into that, just reminding myself right now that I forgot to talk about my startup process, right? Like before I did all this. Yes, I do have references. I did not set them up in pure reference though. I just had them like kind of there. and I kind of already knew what I wanted to do anyway, and I just jumped into the concept a little bit early. But usually you want to gather references first and take a lot of time that you need, and then go and do the concept, and then from there you can start building the scene. So let me go ahead and show the let me go ahead and show you the concept that I had. And this is the concept that I did in Procreate. I just drew it real quick, or painted it rather, and obviously looks really different from what I ended up with. And that's because I wanted to try things out, right? And that's what concepting is all about. You try different things, you see if it works. Once you're in the process of making the things and assembling the level, things can change drastically. So keep that in mind. It happens even in the industry as well. It's not going to be the same level all the time. Sometimes those ideas don't work out, and then you got to do something different. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. But anyways, let's jump into the trees, because that's going to be a lot more interesting. So for the trees, we have two types of trees here, and just a little hint, these are the same trees. As you can see, I just copied it and put it up there. And you can make a new tree that way. Now obviously, if this wasn't playable game, I probably wouldn't do that. I would modify this a little bit and then combine it together to make something like that. But again, it's for the scene, so it's not going to matter too much. But let's talk about the trees, its shaders and so on. How do you make these trees and all that? So I use a program called Treeit. Let me just show you that real quick. You can download it. Open up the app here. You can download it for free. It's basically like SpeedTree, just a little bit less features and stuff, but you can kind of mess around with the trunk and so on. You know, you can increase the height of your tree. You start adding branches and little branches on those and so on, and then you can adjust the length and where it's at. If you go a little bit more down, I believe, yeah, right here. And then you can go into the leaves, and you know, there's one already set up here. You can choose a texture for it. Just going to use one of the ones that it comes with already here, this one. And then you can just go and add a bunch of leaves, and pretty much from here you can just make your tree. Now obviously you're gonna have to make these leaf textures, and I'm gonna show you a little quick method on how to do that in just a second. But this is what I use to make the tree. Now I don't just do this and then bring it into Unreal Engine. I bring it into Blender. So when I'm done with the tree, I'm just gonna go to File, Export, and then export it as an OBJ. And then you bring it into Blender. Now it's going to have a leaf material, and it's going to have a trunk material here. So you want to have these textures done before you get started with the leaf. Now the trunk texture I made in Substance Designer. I'm not going to go too much into that, because it really depends on what you want to do, what type of tree. You know, there's so many ways you can make different trunk textures. And I think there's a lot of tutorials out there to help you get started on that. But for the leaves, let's talk about that real quick. So let me close this off. And I'm just going to use Affinity Photo here in this demonstration for the leaves. So I'm just going to make a new layer. And I want it to have a transparent background. So whatever program you're using, if you're using GIMP or Photoshop, you just want transparent background. And we're going to start adding layers. The first layer, I'm just going to, and it's different between different programs. I'm just going to call this leaf. And what you want to do is you want to create a leaf shape. Now you can just stamp some around too, like I do have leaf brushes here, for example. Let's just use maybe one of these. So here I have one. I'm going to select the brush and there's a leaf, right? Now you want to mess around with the dynamics so that the rotation is random. And obviously this can, and you also want to randomize the size a little bit as well. So if I go to dynamics, you can do random size. And then we can increase that a little bit. And then what you want to do is you want to kind of create your texture. Now, obviously I have my leaves all pointing the same way. I'm just showing you an example here. So, let's do that. All right, let's just say that this is the leaf texture, right? Obviously, if you're doing this specific method, you don't have to do it this way. You can use, let me just make a layer real quick. You can use something like the pen tool, and every type of program like this has a pen tool. And you can just click around. And you can make that shape. You just click that and then do this. So let's just do that, and then I can select this one down here. And basically you get the idea. You can make your own leaf this way. Just try to do the same thing. Anyway, so you can do that. You can make a selection out of it and just color it a full on just solid white color, for example, like that. Well, this is black, but you want to use a white color just because it's going to be easier to color it. Or actually, you don't want to color it. You just want to keep them white because we're going to color it in Unreal Engine. So this is just an example there. I'm just going to undo all that. But we have this. So what we want to do now is we want to make it so that this is not showing all this detail and so on. We want it to just be all white. So I'm going to do this, crank that up. And because of these types of textures and the details, we can still see through this. So what I would have to do in this case is duplicate this a couple times. So I'm just going to right click and duplicate it a few times. And as you can see, it'll get darker, and eventually you're going to use this to make your leaf texture. Now you can add little branches and things if you want to. You can paint them in or whatever, but that's basically the method you're going to use to make the leaves. And I'll just show you over here real quick. We'll go to my trees. This is the leaf texture. That's all it is. It's simple. As you can see, it's like the ones that I was doing. And I color it all in the shader. Now that's what we're going to go over right now, because I'm pretty sure you're eager to figure out how to get this sort of shading going on. Now, it's not that easy. I have to go into Blender before I show you this. So I am going to open up the shader and we'll just kind of have a little glance at it real quick. All right. Now let's jump into Blender and let's have a look at the trees. So I'm just going to try to find that here. Should be this one. Alright, so these are the bushes. I made them in the trees because I just use the same texture and you can make bushes with them. So pretty cool. Here's the tree. Now obviously it's quite big. When you bring your tree in from Tree it's going to be big, so you want to make sure you scale it down to whatever your character's height is and so on. You want to get that down. And I separated the leaves from the whole tree itself with the branches because we need the leaves separate due to the fact that we're going to change the normals. We don't want to change the normals of the trunk and its branches, just the leaves. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. Just an easy method when we're using Tree. When we use Tree, it's like I said before, it's going to have a trunk texture and a leaves texture. So when you go into everything, obviously it's going to be hard to select all these individually, right? Can't select everything. So you're just going to go into edit mode if you're using Blender, and you're going to go to the leaves texture and just hit select, and that's going to select all of the leaves. Now I have proportional editing on. Let me turn that off. It's going to select only the leaves and not the branches. Then I would just hit P, which is going to allow you to separate the selection. And then you just do selection, and now your leaves are separate from this. Now at the end we are going to combine them back because we want it to just be one mesh. Now there are some cases where you do want these separate, but in my case, I just combine them together. So in order to get the shading right, your leaves are not going to look like that. Like, you can see the shading is a bit different here from maybe what you're seeing. And in order to do that, we have to go to the wrench here, the modifiers tab, and we need to add a data transfer. So once we add data transfer, we need a source, obviously. So what you're going to do is you're going to do Shift A, or you can go add mesh, and you want to add a UV sphere. Now here's mine. As you can see, it already encompasses all of the leaves, and we're going to copy the shading of this sphere to the leaves, and that's going to give us a bit of a stylized look. So once we have the sphere set up there, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to your leaves right here. You're going to select them. We're on data transfer. You're going to go to this one, face corner data, click on it. You're going to do custom normals, and you're going to select this one, nearest corner of nearest face. And once you do that, you're going to choose the source, and that's the normal sphere. And what that's going to do is that's going to change the shading of your leaves. And then once you're all good, you notice the difference. You can even hide the sphere. I don't think it's going to make a difference, so you can see the shading change. And then you're going to go here and apply it. Now before you apply it, just duplicate this just in case there's any issues, and then apply it. And just have the other one under extra, under a different collection. And then after that, you have the thing, the leaves set up. Combine it back to the tree, to the trunk, so it's all one mesh. Make sure your origin point is at the center there, at the bottom, so when the tree spawns in, it's going to spawn in from here. And then you're just going to export it out as FBX and bring it into Unreal Engine. Now make sure when you export, a lot of people get this wrong. You want to do mesh selected object, so the object you have selected only. You want to apply the transform, and you want to make sure for Unreal Engine that you do face or edge. I always do face, and it works out great. That's smoothing groups, so if you ever get any issue with smoothing groups, it's because of that. So just make sure you do that, and then your trees are good to go. So now, just going to close this off. Let's talk real quick about the leaves shader here, because I know this section's getting a little bit long, but just bear with me. So for the leaves, I have multiple colors here. Now the way you create this is you can hold 3 and right click or left click, and that's going to create a vector 3 node. If you right click it and convert to parameter, you can name it just as I named it here. Make sure they're different names, because if they are the same, it will update the other ones with the same name and have it as the same color. So always, if you're going to do different colors, have a different name, and you can set that up right here. So once you have that set up, it obviously has a value here where default value is. You want to increase this, and then you can select your color. As you can see, it'll update, and that's how you're going to choose your color. So you can duplicate this if you want using, I believe it's Shift D or Control D, and just change the name. Make sure you do that, and you want to select the colors for your leaves. Now I have it set up this way for this tree, so you can set it up whatever way you want. So this is the default color, the base color. My second color here is going to go into the subsurface color. Now, if you don't have that access to the subsurface, make sure you click on the master shader node here, and we're going to set this up real quick. So you want to do surface, mask, two-sided foliage, check the two-sided option. Now what's going to happen is you're going to notice that it's dark in this inner area. And the reason for that is because we need to add emission color to it. So we'll do that in just a second. Don't want to touch that. We'll talk about that later because it comes into play for the grass, and I think that's it. Now your leaves texture, you want to bring that in already, and you're going to plug in the alpha. So make sure when you export it's a PNG and the background is transparent. So we're only going to get the leaves, and you plug the alpha into the opacity mask. You're going to select your different colors for the subsurface, and you want a color for your emissive. So that's going to get rid of the dark area here because it's going to be more brighter, so your shadows are not too dark. And after that, just mess around with the colors, and then you'll be able to get something that you'll eventually like. If you don't have a roughness map, just hold 1 and left click, and it'll add a vector 1 node. You're just going to set the value to 1 and plug that into the roughness. It'll make it full rough and no sparkles or anything like that. You want to make another one, set that to 0, and plug that into the metallic and specular, so again you don't get that shine. Now let's talk about the normals here, because that's also important. So you want to add this vertex normal WS node, and if you type that in, you'll find it here. You're going to click it and bring it in. Then you want this transform vector. If you just type transform, it's going to be this one right here. And then what you're going to do is change it from world space to tangent space. You're going to plug this into there, and then you're going to add a multiply. So again, multiply. You'll find the node, bring it in, and you're going to plug this portion into the B. You're going to add a two-sided sign. Again, you can find it by just typing it in there. All I'm doing is right-clicking to do that, to bring up the search. You're going to set it up like that, and then the multiply is going to be plugged into the normal. So that's going to change the normal so that it's facing, I believe what it does, it's going to make the normal sort of face up, if I'm not mistaken. It's just going to correct your normal. So, and then to make the sort of leaves move, I use a simple grass wind. Again, you can just type this stuff in to bring it in. These are all vector 1 nodes, so if you do 1 and left click, it'll bring it. Right click, convert to parameter, put the name. In this case, you can copy the same thing I have here, and then you're going to change the values to what they are. So 1, you're going to mess around with these 3 here, and that's going to give you your wind effect. And that's pretty much it for the leaves. That's all it is. It's very simple. It's nothing too crazy, no little magic tricks. Once you have this set up, you should be good to go for your leaves. And then you should have something like this. So that's pretty much it on the trees. I think I covered everything from the leaves, the trunk. I made the texture in Substance Designer, so there's not really anything unique about the trunk. That's all it is. I just have this here. This is just an overlay blend, so I can make the trunk lighter or darker depending on what I want. And I'm using a texture coordinate node. Again, you can right click and search for this, and I have it set to 0.5 so that the texture isn't repeating. Obviously, it's gonna scale up the size of the texture, and that's pretty much it for the bark. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the trees. So I think trees are knocked out. Let's see what other things we need to talk about here. Let's talk about the flowers and all that stuff, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the clouds in the sky. So yeah, we'll jump right into it. Alright, so flowers. I wasn't much of a flower person when I was working at the small studio. I didn't do it, someone else did it, which was this young lady, and she was really good at it. She would paint them in Photoshop and make the texture and then assemble it in the 3D program to make them 3D, which all of these are. And let's go ahead and have a look at them real quick here. So these are the, if we go a little closer, you can kind of see they're 3D. And they all have this, they all are built in a similar way, and they have this waviness to them. They're using the simple grass winds. So let's talk about how you can create this texture. Now, I'm going to link a video to you, and I highly recommend subscribing to this person. Let me bring her YouTube channel up real quick here. Let me go on there real quick, and we'll just go to YouTube. And we're just going to search up stylized trees. Now, you don't have to search that up, but this is the video right here that you want to check out. And the YouTuber is Victoria here, and she's really good at talking about trees and foliage. So if you want a more in-depth look at how to make this type of trees and all that stuff, I would highly recommend checking her video out. Obviously, as you can see here, she does a really good job at it, and you can kind of get that similar effect from her. Now, keep in mind she uses Maya, so some of the things there are a little different. The process is kind of the same, but different features in there. So in Blender, the features are kind of the same, but they work differently. Just keep that in mind when you're seeing this, if you're using Blender. But most of all, it's fairly similar. It's just the leaves that she has are different. As you can see here, she has leaves that are a lot more populated, and the ones that I did were along the lines of kind of like this. They're more spread out, so you can kind of mess around with that, but it's all up to what you want to do. So you can kind of mimic this sort of stuff. But she also talks about how to make leaves in Photoshop, the textures and plants and all that stuff. So again, this is her channel. I highly recommend checking it out. Now I'm going to show you how I did this, and I did this in Affinity Photo. So let me just show you in GIMP, because GIMP is free, and most likely maybe you don't have Affinity Photo, or maybe you have Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, I recommend checking the video out that she did. But if you don't, and you don't have Affinity Photo, let me show you how it is in GIMP. So I'm going to go new, and then we're just going to create a 2048 by 2048 texture. Now I'm going to go to advanced. You want to make sure that this is transparency. So we have a transparent background. You're going to make a new layer, and we'll just call it flower shape for right now. You're going to have to make multiple layers in order to improve this. I'm just going to show you how you can make the shape, and then from there you can kind of go in and paint your highlights and whatever you want to do. So you want to use the path tool if you're using GIMP. And what you want to do is you want to click around. Again, it's almost like what I was showing you in Affinity Photo. And then I believe control clicking will close that off. And just trying to remember how to break the handles off of this. Yeah, I think it's control. And yeah, if you hold control and then left click from the middle point, you can kind of control the sort of shape there. And then if I select that by left clicking, I can hold control again. And you just want to make your flower shape. Now I'm going to undo that actually because I want this sharp shape. And that's kind of what I did for the flower anyways. So you can mess with the shape and do whatever you want. Once you're happy with the shape, you're going to just do selection from path. And then from there, you're going to use the gradient tool, which is right here. And you can have the colors already selected. So for the first color, let's say you want to do a pink flower. So I'm just going to make it a little bit of a lighter pink. And then the darker color, we'll just make it a sort of darker pink. Then here we have the gradient tool. We're on our flower shape. And as you can see, we can easily make that sort of gradient. If I hold control, I can snap this and make it straight. Now before you can't just click off. You want to make sure once you have the gradient the way you want, you have your colors set up. You're going to hit enter, and that's going to apply the gradient. And now we have our flower shape here. We still have the selection. So if you want to do anything else, if let's say you want to make a mask of this just in case, you want to make a new layer here. Let me see, it should be down here. Yeah, create a new layer. Just put whatever. And then I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to use the bucket fill tool, which I have hiding under here. If I right click, I can switch around. And I'm going to fill that with white. So now I have a mask shape for this. So if I need to select it, I can do color by selection, which is under here, select by color. And it'll make it easier for me to select that again. But anyways, I'm just going to hide that. Once we have our shape done, I'm just going to click on this selection tool. I'm going to go to select none. And now we have our shape. So let's say we want to make the flower. Now what do we do? So once we have this, we can duplicate it. So I'm going to right click and duplicate. So now we have two of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. And if you right click, we have multiple different selections here. I'm going to do rotate. I'm going to make sure I'm on this copy. Select it. And we're just going to rotate it by, I don't know, maybe 15 degrees. Actually, no, let's do 45, right? And we're going to go ahead and click rotate. So now it's going to rotate it. Keep in mind, this is going to increase depending on how high quality this is. And it could lag you, so be careful on that. Then what I'm going to do is just click it and sort of assemble it here. You might have a seam line, but you can go over it later and sort of blend it in. You might want that. And then you're just going to keep doing the same thing. You're going to duplicate. On that duplicated layer, you're going to rotate it. And since we've been doing 45 degrees, you're just going to do another 45. Rotate it. It's going to do its thing. And then just sort of adjust it. And then you can kind of get the picture. As soon as you go around, you're eventually going to make the whole flower shape. And then once you do that, in order to do the thing in the middle, you're just going to go to this. We have rectangle select or ellipse select. You can go to ellipse. And you want to be on a new layer, obviously, when you do this. just name it whatever, and then you're just going to do the center selection and adjust it. And then from there, simple bucket fill tool with the proper color. And you'll have your selection there. Now maybe you might not want to do that. You want to do another gradient. So you can go to the gradient tool, and what you're going to do is you can go to linear and change it to radial. And we'll just choose a darker orange. So we got lighter and darker orange. Might want to flip that. But you get the picture. If you flip the colors, actually we can just do that there. And then we can flip the colors and just adjust it, and you get that smoother transition. Remember to hit enter. Select none, and yeah. Pretty simple. You'll have a basic flower shape, and then from there, if you just sort of add shadows and improve, I'll just show you a cool little technique you can do to add shadows. Do shadows, and then let's say you just choose a darker color. Let me change the size of this too big. So I'm on the shadows. Let's say I just coloring around for the shadows, right? Put this under here. And then you want to, the shadows are obviously too dark. You can mess around with the layers here. And then what you can do is go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur. As you can see, you can kind of blend it in and make darker shadow here if you want to do that, so you can kind of see the difference. Maybe it's too much. You can lower the opacity, and you know, maybe that's a lot better. So eventually that's how you can create different flowers, and it works for everything, not only flowers, it works for plants. The stem is just a simple square color with a gradient on there, and yeah, that's pretty much it on flowers. There's nothing more to it. It's just pretty simple. Now for the grass, well, before I show you the grass, let's see the flowers material, right? This is the flowers material. So I bring in the texture, I'm plugging in the base color there, and I just plug the same thing into the subsurface just so I believe that'll fix the dark areas. I don't have an emissive color because I don't want it to shine or pop too much or glow. Have these setups, and then again we use that vertex normal WS. You can pretty much do the same thing here, and that plugs into the normals node. That's just going to correct our normals, and simple grass wind that gets plugged into the world position offset. That's all the flowers material is, so nothing crazy. So now we'll talk about grass in this next section, just because it's a little bit more to the shader and how you can get this grass, and I'll show you like the differences and so on. So let's jump into that. So grass is one of those things that a lot of artists try to get right, and it seems a lot of people tend to gravitate toward this type of grass, right? So how do you do this? How do you make this grass? Well, first off, this grass I'm gonna just show you real quick in I'm not gonna open up Blender, but I'm gonna just do it straight here in Unreal Engine. We'll go to the grass. I know I didn't cover the bushes. All it is the leaves from the trees, and you can make a plane, copy it around, and you can make bushes out of that. It's pretty simple, and the bush material is quite similar to this one, so nothing too fancy for the bushes. But anyways, grass is under my terrain section here, terrain folder. This is the model. That's all it is. It's literally a plane. And what I did is I made a few cuts, and then the top two vertices, I merged those together, and the bottom ones I merged together. And that's all it is for the grass. Then I copy it around, move it, and bend it a little bit just to get a different shape for the grass. You can make some of these smaller or bigger, whatever you want to do. And that's pretty much it for the model. Now, you're going to export it as an FBX, and then you're going to bring it into here. And we're going to create the material here. Now, there is no texture to the grass. It's just straight up one color with proper shader. Now, I do have runtime virtual texturing on. That's why, like, you can see it kind of blends in nicely with the ground. And that's what runtime virtual texturing is. I'm not going to cover that in this video just because I feel like there's way too many videos on that. Maybe I'll link one in the description that you can check out. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the grass. So let's go into the shader of the grass. How do we get this look? So let's first off see what it might look like for you. So this is my shader, and it's not complicated. Don't worry about it. The first thing we want to do before we mess around with anything is we want to go to the master material node here, and we want to adjust some things. So we want to obviously do surface, mask, default lit is fine. You can mess around with this if you want. I don't have two-sided because we don't really need that. And what I did is I scrolled down here, and you'll see this on tangent space normal. Turn it off. Now let me show you why you want it off. If I turn it on, I'm going to just move this a little bit. Look at the grass right here. I'm gonna hit save, right? Let's see what happens. So it's gonna calculate the shaders. It's gonna take a little bit of time. We'll wait it out. And boom. It looks really ugly, the grass. Look at that. Really, really ugly. It's like just dark areas, and you don't want that. So the trick to getting that soft style is turning this off. Now, it's not only that, you obviously have to mess with the normals, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So let me save this to go back. And it's just going to compile. There we go. So now we're back to that. Let's break everything down. So I'm using runtime virtual texturing. So don't worry about this. You might not have that. And don't even worry about this. This was all just a test to have like this sort of wind effect going over the grass. Now, I didn't really go with this because it's kind of hard to get right, and you have to have the proper texture for it, so you won't really have to worry about it too much. In the video that I linked to you, I believe it does talk about this, so if you want to go with that, just check out that video. But what you might have is just the grass color, and that's gonna be a vector 3. I kind of show you how to bring that up. If you don't know, it's hold 3, left click, right click, and then convert this to a parameter, and then name it, and then you're gonna just choose your color right over here, and that's gonna be the grass color. So that's probably gonna be plugged into your base color. You're gonna have this set up for your, turning off the shininess and making it full roughness. And again, don't worry about all this. If you want to copy it, you can. This is, again, a runtime virtual texture sample node. You can search that up too and add that in if you want. It's just using the base color. But this is going to be important right here, and that is the normals. For grass, the normals can't be random all over the place. If it is, it's not going to look good. What we want is for it to point up. And in order for it to point up, not only do we have to turn that option off, but we have to have this here. So this is, again, if you hold 3, left click, you're going to add in the vector 3. And for the value here, you're just going to hit 0, 0, and type in 1 here. And that's going to make this just a solid blue color, which means the normals are going to be pointing up. You're going to add a two-sided sine node, a multiply, plug it in like this, and that goes into the normal. And that's going to fix your normals for your grass, and it should look similar to what I have here. And then this is just the wind. Again, you can just copy this here. I'm using a 1- node. Now the reason why I have this set up is so that the wind affects the top and not the bottom. So you can just copy this. If you right click, texture coordinate, you can add that in. Didn't really do much with it there, I just have it the same. You can add this mass node. If you type component, it's component mass. Just deselect that, make sure green channel selected. And then you're going to plug it into a 1- node. You're just going to do 1-, and there it is. Plug that into the wind weight, and then these are all just vector 1 values. Just hold 1, left click, and you can add it in. And that goes into, again, the world position offset. And that's it. That's literally it for the grass. That's how you get this style of grass. And not a lot of videos cover it that much. I don't know why they don't talk about this option right here, especially turning off tangent space normal. But that's how you would get the grass that you're seeing here. So now that we covered grass, the only other thing to cover now, I believe, is just the sky and the clouds. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about the post-processing stuff to get, to make your scene look a little bit better. So let's go ahead and start talking about the clouds and sky a bit. Alright, so clouds are quite interesting, right? Usually when Unreal Engine starts, you have those boring clouds that I guess are somewhat realistic, but for a stylized scene, it's probably not what you want, and you want to obviously fix that. And the way you fix that is by adding custom clouds. And in order to do that, it's a bit of a process, but I'm going to show you a video that showed me this technique and helped me out with basically a lot of my other projects. So let's just jump on YouTube here. So the YouTuber artist is William, and he shows you how it works in Unreal Engine 4 and 5. This is the video name if you want the specific video. If you check this video out, he's going to show you how to set it up and what you need to do, how to enable engine content, which is what you're going to want to enable in order to find out where all these files are and stuff, because you're going to need to drag a few things into the scene itself and just adjust where it is in your hierarchy just for organization purposes. Like, I'll show you mine here. I have a folder that I created, and it has the clouds and all of the different clouds in here. So these are objects. As you can see, I can move them around and they'll change shape, but I can control where they're at. And it also affects the back. Now, there is an option where you can just make it just the single cloud and not the ones in the back. I just like the back ones and kept them in. But that's what it's going to allow you to do. The clouds you start with in Unreal Engine, it doesn't allow you to do that. So you need to add a BP cloud mass generator into the scene, as well as a BP cloud mass object. And then you're going to be duplicating that object around and changing some settings. I believe if you click on it here, there's some settings you can change. It might be right here. These are some of the settings, the density and so on. And I'm not sure if you can change some settings in the cloud material itself. But if you mess around with it, eventually you'll be able to do that. The BP Cloud Mass Generator here, there's, I believe, just a few things as well that you might be able to change. I'm not too sure, but just be careful that you don't mess around with something and just mess everything up. And you're going to want to add these. Now, once you see William's video, and let's say you make your clouds, one thing you're going to run into is when you hit play, the clouds are going to disappear, or they're going to look different, and they're not going to be in place like this. So how do you fix that? So I'm going to show you how you do that. So once you have the BP cloud mask generator in, you're going to go to edit BP cloud mask blueprint. You're going to click on that. It's going to bring up the blueprints. Now what you want to do is you might be in a different section here. You want to go to the event graph, and you want to add this in here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. You want to start off by having an event tick, so you can right click and search event tick, add it in, right click, search branch. If just in case if these aren't here, I don't remember if they were here or not. You can type all these in and it'll literally bring up those nodes. And you want to copy this exact setup here. So let's move this over a little bit more. You want to copy this. So what this is going to do is when you hit play, it's going to actually render your clouds, and that's the problem. It's not rendering the clouds, so it's not giving data of what to render, and it just doesn't render nothing. So you want to have this, and that should fix the issue. You're going to compile it and save it, and then you should have your clouds. Now it is going to disappear on me here, which is fine. Basically, if I just hit play, it'll be back, and then I can go back in. It'll be there. So you want to use that to fix the clouds. So definitely check William's video out. That's going to help you get the clouds. And that's pretty much it for clouds. Once you get all that set up, you can have your own custom clouds, move them around. That fix is going to help you make it so when you hit play, you can have no problem. And yeah, now we'll get to the sky stuff, and that's part of post-processing. So I guess we'll kind of talk about that in this next section. Alright, so the final section is just post-processing stuff. How do you get your scene to look a lot more better, right? Let me just turn off my post-processing just to see what we have. This is what we had before. Obviously you can see it's very blue and muted, and it just does not look good. It just doesn't look good. It looks pretty boring and sad. And we can even turn off some of these other things, and you can just kind of see it going downhill from there. And then exponential height fog, if I turn that off, you can kind of see the scene for what it is, right? So let's talk about all these things and how they help improve. So obviously you want to have a directional light, and you need to just set up the main source of light, which is this. That's going to determine where your shadows are and stuff like that. So once you have that set up, you want to add, if these things are not added in already, an exponential height fog is great because it's going to sort of soften some things, and also if you have things in the distance, it kind of blurs it a bit and makes it a little misty, so you don't have this sharp line. If I turn it off, you can see that sharp line, but this kind of helps to make it less. And if you mess around with the settings here, like the fog density and the height, starting distance, you can mess around with that. The color of the fog, you can mess around with those settings, and you can get something to your liking, and that can help improve your scene. Adding this is quite important as well, just so if your scene, it's going to throw errors about this, so it's probably a good idea just to have it. And you can add that in by going right here, volumes, and then you can add light mass importance volume. That's just going to tell your tell Unreal Engine basically what is important to render and so on, so that way you're not having such a long time to start your scene up. Then you have post-processing volume, which is another important thing. So before I talk about that, let's just talk about skylight real quick. This is going to help. So if I have it off, it's going to make areas like your shadows and stuff not have any sort of light bouncing on it. So with a skylight, that blue light, whatever color you have set up for your skylight, it's going to bounce off of everything and sort of make everything a little bit more brighter, your shadows and so on. As you can see, turn it off again. See how the shadow's dark? But when I turn it on, it's just much more brighter and nicer and soft. This is going to help out with that. You can mess around with the settings here with the color. I just have cast shadows off because we don't need too many shadows being casted. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the skylight. You can mess around with the settings there. Sky atmosphere is where I have where I change the color for my sky. Obviously, you can mess around with this color and see, just see what you want to get. You can mess a little bit with the absorption and so on. Now, post-processing is the last thing that you want to add to your scene. As a matter of fact, you don't want to do much of this at the start. You kind of want to gradually do it. But post-processing is going to be the last thing. Like, you can add it, but do not touch the color grading section, at least not yet, and probably don't even touch it at all if you don't know too much on color theory, because I would brush up my skills on that. It's going to be very important to sort of help you determine how you want your scene to feel a little warmer and so on. So what I have is bloom, and these are my settings. Then I went to just color grading, and here I have different things set up. So for the midtones, if I just turn that off, it's going to be blue again. But when I turn it on, I messed with the gamma color and made it more of a warm color, and just slightly warm. It still has a bit of white in it, so it just helps to make the scene more warm and alive. And for the highlights, this just messes with the grass here. If I turn it off, you can see it's a little bit poppy and stuff, and I might not want that. So if I click on the gain, it's going to just make it so it's not as bright. So it's just a little subtle change there. And then under film, I messed around with these settings. If I turn them off, this is what we get. And then turning them on just helps clear up the scene a little bit more. And I think that's pretty much it. You can mess around with all this stuff, see what fits your scene, but just remember to do this at the end, because you don't want to start changing so much colors around, because it's going to throw you off. So this is something you do at the end once you've finalized everything. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's so simple. Well, not always simple, but it just, the main thing with this is it takes a lot of time, and it's going to take just more practice and doing this stuff over and over just to understand your scenes and everything a lot more better. Look at what other people do as well, and definitely check out the videos that I've linked and shown you. They're gonna really help you out with that stuff as well. They're really great artists and just great content creators in general. So I think that pretty much concludes everything. I think I broke down everything that I needed to for the scene. It's pretty easy, and I'll have all timestamps for everything, so in case you need to go back, you can just go to that specific section. But yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and close off the video, and then from there I will, in my closing, mention my next project and stuff. So alright, so we reached the end of the video. I'm just going to close things off here, and I'll mention just what I'm going to be doing next as well. I just want to thank everyone who watched the video. I hope this breakdown was helpful and interesting. I know my scene is not like super crazy. There's of course a lot of other artists that do quite a lot more things in their scenes. But the main thing is you don't really need to do too much. You know, like you don't want to take too much of the attention away from your focal point. Um, you just kind of want to get the point down, and that's pretty much what I did here with this scene. My main focal point is right there. I made it as nice as possible. Um, Usually, you want to have a story. I know that there might not be much of a story here, but sometimes it does end up that way for certain scenes. But good storytelling can be quite helpful and really put you ahead of the game if you're really looking to get into the industry and so on. But again, I just want to thank you so much, and I'm going to be working on my next environment, which I'll give a heads up. You can follow that process on my Instagram. I'll have it in the link in the description below, as well as I have a TikTok as well, and it's just gonna have the same name, Zephyr's Domain. It might be Zephyr's underscore domain, and you can check out any updates and stuff that I'm doing on that. It's going to possibly be a realistic scene. I feel like a lot more people like that stuff versus stylized. So I may end up doing that just to change things up a little bit. But if you're new to the channel, definitely consider subscribing, liking the video, sharing it with others, even leaving a comment below is goes a long way. It just tells me all these things. It just helps me to know that the viewers like this content. People like this content and they want to see more of it. Eventually I do have some plans later to do certain things like collaborations and just I already have my Discord, but just having others there and working on projects with others together. So I think that would be quite interesting, giving them tips live and so on. And if it does go a lot more further, I may end up streaming, which I think will be really fun, and we can do some giveaways and so on. So yeah, thank you guys for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next videos.